doesn't look real pretty, I can tell you that right now. We'll be there in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, our service will begin shortly. Could you please use this moment to turn your phone on to silent? Thank you.
Welcome, family and friends, and all those that are joining today via live stream. As you are aware, a fine gentleman has been lost to us. Someone who not only left his mark on us in the community, but on us individually. Today is our chance to say goodbye and celebrate the rich and the full life of David George Abrams, a kind, generous, humble man. Today we also give thanks to the treasured 91 years that he spent with us. I'm Jenny Tessa, and it's an honour to lead you through this time of farewell. On behalf of David's family, I would like to thank you all for being here today. They'd also wish to thank those who have travelled to be here, as well as those who could not make it, but have kindly sent messages of love and support. Many of those are joining us via live stream, which seems fitting today, as David was always ahead of his time with technology. I'm told that he had an Apple Watch, an iPhone, an iPad, and he could Zoom as well as the best of them. So I'm sure David would be happy today knowing that we are live streaming not only across the country but across the world. In saying this, I'd like to especially welcome all of David's grandchildren and their families. Joining via live stream are Chris and Rhiannon Dent from Dubai, Graham, Alex, and Marcus Sanders in Brisbane. I'll just hold for a moment. Chris and Belinda, Coco and Poppy Simmons on the Gold Coast, welcome. Your presence is most certainly felt here today amongst us. Wow, that rain's really coming down. We gather here to honour David's life, and as I look around, I'm not surprised to see so many of you here today. David wasn't just a part of the community, his family history was entwined in the history of the Clarence Valley. As Sally put it, his family, his friends and his community were his guiding lights. Anyone that knew David also knew that when he gave you his time, he stopped, he listened, and he gave you his full attention. And that is what we will do for him today. We have put aside our daily toils as we join to honour his life and his achievements, and to stand with his family in their grief, and also to support one another. It is difficult to say goodbye to someone whose impact was so great. We grieve for someone that gave significantly. We may feel waves of mixed emotion, of joy and sadness as they wash over us. But we grieve because we love. You see, grief is a great indicator and measure of love. You simply cannot have one without the other. Whilst we grieve for our loss, there is undeniably something to celebrate. We celebrate the fact that we were privileged and honoured to have known David and to have lived our lives side by side with him. Let us be comforted today knowing that David had lived a good life. He did not live his life in fear, and he did not die in fear. In fact, he welcomed the end. He was a man that stepped up to challenges, a man that made a difference. When it was his time to die, he did so on his terms, with grace, courage, and dignity. I'd like to invite Alex Abrams, one of David's many nephews, to please come forward and share the Mourner's Kaddish, the traditional Jewish prayer.
May his great name grow exalted and sanctified. In the world that he created and he willed, may he give reign to his kingship in your lifetimes and in your days, and in the lifetimes of the entire family of Israel, swiftly and soon. Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and ever. Blessed, praised, glorified, exalted, extolled, mighty, upraised, and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed is he. Beyond any blessing and song, praise and consolation that are uttered in the world. Amen. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life upon us and upon all Israel. Amen. He who makes peace in his heights, may he make peace upon us and upon all Israel. Amen.
Thank you, Alex. We move now to the life, the milestones, the events of David's life. And his daughters Sally, Jan, Meg and Marion have prepared a heartfelt eulogy in honour of their father. And I'd like them to come forward to share that with us now.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Our Father has come to the end of its journey, and we gather here today to celebrate his life, to offer farewell and to share the story of a life so well lived. We first acknowledge we gather here today on Bundjalung country, on the country of his birth. And we acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. And we pay our deep respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. He was born just 300 metres from this place, in Dobie Street, in a house called Bloomfield, born at home, the third child of Alma and Leo, joining his elder brother John, elder sister Judy, and soon joined by his little sister Marion. Although his siblings settled beyond the valley, he made a life here on this land for 91 years. We are lucky to have had him. Before he was 3, our grandmother told us, she thought he would not live to see the dawn. Twice, our grandmother told us, he was struck down with childhood illnesses. I held him close, she told us, my little black curly-haired boy. I held him close, I kept him close in my kitchen. And so our father learned to cook. Many here would recall the fearsome reputation our mother Wendy had, and she enjoyed as a welcoming and talented cook. But perhaps you may not know, he taught her everything she knew. The only meal she brought to the newlywed kitchen was roast pork and vegetables. All else he shared with her. It seems somewhat appropriate that his last meal was indeed roast pork with perfect crackling, of course, from Meg's kitchen. Our father was chef, barbecue king, breakfast cook, creator of Chinese feasts, a fisherman who put food on our table, and on occasions brought live crabs scuttling across our kitchen floors. Thankfully, his prowess with the Christmas ham has now been passed on to his grandson, Andrew, and his flair for whiting fillets I now hold. He will be sorely missed in the front row at Glen Innes Gourmet Fiesta and from behind the stove where sometimes he was called to assist. And so he has sustained, fed and nourished all with the lessons of family and love of food gained from his mother all through his long life.
David was educated at Grafton Primary School, Sydney Grammar School and Grafton High School. Whilst at Sydney Grammar, he was able to prepare for his bar mitzvah, learning Hebrew at the Great Synagogue, and took bar mitzvah at 13. At 17, he went to Sydney to learn the trade of buying and selling goods at Hoffnung's in the city, before he returned to his family's shops, Gerrard's and McKittrick's, on either side of the river, aged 19. But before he came home to work alongside his father and uncle, he had begun to step out with our mother Wendy, both just 19, in Sydney. Young and sure in the knowledge they had each found the true love of their lives, as they truly had. They travelled separately, and when they had seen the world, at 24, they returned to Grafton to marry and make a family. He remained, he remained to the end of his days devoted to his daughters, welcomed new additions, and delighted in his ever-expanding family. You didn't have to be officially connected to be part of his family. He became Pa to many youngsters. He was Uncle Dave, Big Dave, DG, Mr. David, to all he offered interest and support. At home over the years and growing up, we saw Dad and Mum open our homes, from Grafton to Yamba, along the mighty Clarence, open the dining room, kitchen, the ski boat, the beach house, to all who came to the valley. There were famous parties for any occasion, both grand and small, from the July race week formalities to the offer to join us for a barbecue and a beer. He travelled far and wide, from his first sea journey on the Otranto to London and beyond, hitchhiked around Europe, crisscrossing Canada. He loved to tell us the story of he and his mates camping for days in the mall to ensure they had front row seats for the coronation procession of Queen Elizabeth. I went to the coronation, he told us. And as was so often the case with our father, he also found the time to travel to Bude on the Cornish coast, where he palled up with a fellow Aussie surf lifesaver to share the very latest in resuscitation methods with his instruction certificate gained at Yamba Surf Club. Dad was a very proud country mouse and an accomplished city mouse who travelled the world, trooping off with Mum, with Miggy and Alan, or adventurous friends. Whether for business or pleasure, he had his passport at the ready and would pack a bag whenever sport or family gave opportunity. Off to the Rugby World Cup, 2 trips to the UK for the varsity match between Oxford and Cambridge, cheering along his grandson-in-law. He was the consummate traveller, enjoying his last overseas trip with a family holiday in Queenstown at 89 years of age. Ever the optimist and intrepid traveller, his 2022 planner was most recently updated on his last Saturday to mark his intent to travel to Dublin in August for Dave and Neve's wedding, whilst commenting he hoped he would be home in time for his annual pilgrimage to Fraser Island for the fishing and the company of mates.
It's a cliche, but Dad really did have a gift for friendship. As a Grafton-born local, he had a wonderful cohort he'd grown up with, many who are here today. But then as an adult, anyone that came into his or Mum's orbit was befriended, authentically, with interest and support. Membership to the Grafton Men's Club assured, need your groceries delivered, need some new curtains, do you play golf? Do you like going to the races? You must come on picnics upriver with us. You must come water skiing and fishing with us. How many here learned to ski behind Jake? Age did not matter with Dad. He had a natural gift for making everyone welcome and included. Poor health and COVID made 2021 his most challenging year. Too much time in hospital. Not enough time to beetle around Grafton on his little mobility scooter. Not enough time at the men's shed. Not enough time at the U3A Jabberfest. Not enough Thursday nights at the Clock Tower, where he had dinner with a group of friends for over 50 years. He loved this contact with his friends that these activities provided, and he missed socialising so much this year. I want to say thank you to the Lismore branch of his Friendship Tribe for the many hospital visits. Your company brightened his days in this last year, and we're very grateful for that support. Dad respected and revered with awe all the tertiary educated family and friends he knew as lawyers, doctors, dentists, teachers, vets, speech pathologists, accountants, but his natural passion and love was for retail. He said being in the marketplace was his idea of the best career. Gerard's, under his stewardship, was truly the David Jones of the North. He was forever on the lookout for the latest and best in fashions, food, furniture, fabrics, and business processes. Try to buy the current cohort of Prue Acton, Carla Zampatti, Norma Tullo in your local department store now. No Grafton resident will forget the thrill of a Thursday night supermarket shop, followed by the culinary delights of Gerard's cafeteria for a dinner out. No teenage Grafton resident will forget the delights of a caramel thick shake and hot donut after school, made before your very eyes with the whiz-bang automatic donut maker. Typically, his involvement and influence in business was wide. He was a long-time member of the Retail Trade Association and a board member of Trelaws of Tamworth. He was at the cutting edge of technology, from owning the first iteration of a calculator, much to the disgust of our grandfather, to adopting the earliest use of barcoding and scanning, to the establishment of all things computerised across his business. He maintained to the last minute an eye on fashion, gifting his great-granddaughter Lulu some money on her 9th birthday last week to spend in a bricks and mortar retail store, which she gleefully did. He maintained a particular interest and admiration for the following generations: retailers, people in the marketplace, practitioners, entrepreneurs in the family, from Grundy Thompson, Apparel Group, Pacific Smiles, the many ventures of Dave and Steve Grundy, through to the latest crop, Incognito Art, Clubbies, and Fat Tuna in Darwin. He was a wonderful and natural leader. He taught his staff through osmosis the way to treat people, with calmness, respect, kindness, helpfulness, interest and support. Many of us here, including me and my sisters and dear friends online, had their first jobs at Gerard's. And there was probably no better way to enter the workforce than a stint in that wonderful department store. Dad was a lifelong feminist. There were no pay gaps or gender gaps at Gerard's. He and our grandfather established schemes for all employees to access home loans and health insurance. They had an informal arrangement with the local high schools to be a careers pipeline for any 15 or 16-year-olds who then often went on to spend their careers in Gerard's and prospered in life, all down to my father. Dad really did lift people up.
Our father managed to combine all his talents for love and generosity in all his endeavours. When I was 11, I determined that I would have a horse. Please, Dad, many times. Ever the willing father, he said yes. And so an old grey horse arrived in our lives, Oscar. Dad ensured I learned to care for him, feed and groom him, as well as enjoy my time in the saddle. By the time I was 13, I determined that I would have a horse that could jump, really jump, and run across country and show off in the dressage ring. And again, Dad said yes, and Rocky arrived. We spent many weekends driving to gymkhanas, shows and rodeos across New South Wales and beyond. Ever the energetic and supportive father. He indulged me, as he did all his daughters, in my first love of horses. In later years, he inspired me to start swimming, just as he decided to return to the pool himself. He didn't just give, he inspired. He sent programs encouraging me to learn how to swim properly. We spent many hours discussing swimming techniques and training. He was always our greatest fan, barracking from so many sidelines. He was the chief cheerleader. How he loved to watch his grandsons play rugby, his great-granddaughters play anything. Even when Meg, as a 15-year-old netballer, banished him to the car because it was so embarrassing to have a parent there, he would, in breach of agreements, toot his horn whenever her team scored a goal. Our father also ran onto plenty of sporting fields and swam in all manners of water. He knew how to work and he knew how to play. From rugby as a youngster to squash as a 30-something, golf for decades with his geezers, swimming with his masters, river fishing with Mossy, the annual Fraser Island fishing trip, with Alan and Spencer, to watching the ponies run around hoping the latest tip proved worthwhile. Sport was about health and friendships, but he had enough of a competitive spirit to take great pleasure in winning. And of course, our father never really just turned up. I was in Pony Club, so there he was volunteering for the 5 a.m. feed. Joined the committee, devoting his skills and nous as the president, the treasurer, a reliable stalwart, as he did with so many of his sporting and community endeavours. Giving of his time, energy and skills as a volunteer came naturally to our father. Dad cleaned up at the New South Wales Volunteer of the Year Awards in 2014 at a sparkling event at Kirribilli Club. Every single person was gobsmacked at his CV. One of the minister's staffers asked Jan, why did it take so long to put in the application? They pointed to his extraordinary record of continuous service since 1947, starting with the South Grafton Rugby League Club through to the Incognito Art Show in June 2021. 74 years of volunteering, quite an innings.
He sometimes joked about being the Jewish treasurer and fundraiser for the local Catholic nursing home and children's home. I'm good with the money, he said. He was a man who reached across all aisles, who challenged sectarian divides. He welcomed difference. Who we worshipped, how we loved, he was accepting and celebrating of all. If retailing was his career, then woodworking was his passion. A founding member of the Grafton Men's Shed, he was in his element with his mates in an incredible workshop, expanded and developed through his prodigious fundraising and grant application skills, inspired by the shared vision of a small band of men. There are dozens of boxes, beautifully crafted, tables, desks, wine racks, all marked with the stamp Pa Productions, all now treasured by family and friends. As children, he built us a sailing boat, Peter Pan, in the garage after work. It took months, with 23 coats of lacquer to protect her. She sailed for decades on the river. At 70, we gifted him Iolanthe, a little wooden riverboat in need of a total rebuild, which he cheerfully took on. He loved a project, especially if it was a boat for his beloved river. From a rowboat with his brother John, to Canadian canoes, to the infamous Jake, he adored his time on the river. As he aged and no longer jumped into boats, he was lead transporter and logistician for the River Odysseans, led by his two nephews, Alex and Steve, with their closest companions, who camped with him on each first night and canoed his river for over 40 years. It is no surprise that when Grafton Library created a talking book project, our father, the man of the river, told the story of the river. He is river born, as Barbara Fay would say. He died on top of the mountain at Glen Innes, just to the north of the headwaters of the Man River, where it begins at Llangollen Lake. And now we have brought him home. His final journey along the river. From the small beginnings, the river runs across the tableland until it cascades off the plateau, shouldering the old Grafton Road through to Newton Boyd, A glance up at Maningundu at the junction with the clear waters of the Nimboida. The doubled water flow of the rivers spread out and bounce down the boulders of Bridal Vale Falls. Deep torrents flow over New Zealand floors. The river flattens onto Jackadgery, past Kangi and into the Broadwater teeming with life. His river, black swans, turtles, platypus, cod and bass. Meeting up with the Clarence at Kumbaja, a sharp right turn to cascade over the many falls of the gorge lit with rainbows. The river slows much and meanders under Lilydale Bridge onto Copmanhurst, where the echoes of storytelling and yarns of his travels softly murmur. Along the steady flow of the river onto Grafton, we have brought him now to the North Bank, to his resting place. And soon we will bury him here with sand from the Yagle coast, from the mouth of his river, scattered on his grave. He died with his daughters by his side. He had time for goodbyes and to give thanks and hear thanks. With a son-in-law, grandsons, a granddaughter, all close by him. He spoke with all those who could not be in the room. He looked around, free of pain, and told us, "This is wonderful, incredible." He met our gaze and asked, "Are you happy?" Yes, for him, we are happy. All here can be happy. We celebrate his life and we grieve with gratitude. We have now shared the stories of our father, and we sit to listen to the stories of the grandfather.
Thank you, ladies. It was beautiful. On behalf of all the grandchildren, Georgie, Dave, Ed and Andrew would like to come forward to share a tribute to their grandfather. Will you please come forward?
That was a beautiful eulogy. Thanks. My name's Ed Liston, and David was my pa. I'm honoured to speak today and offer this tribute. I want to give you an insight into what it was like being a grandchild of Clarence Valley royalty. My earliest memories of pa was spent at his place in Grafton. I remember picking lemons, climbing the fig trees, roast dinners and hours spent in the spa with Nanny watching on. Yamba meant plenty of time at the beach, surrounded by family, with Pa perched up in the thick of it in his beach chair that was branded with Premier on the back, and that's how the nickname the Premier was coined by us grandsons. I believe it was Chris Dent. Pa was always working on something at Strath, whether it was cooking or construction related. He'd get us involved without much convincing. Pa really knew how to make life fun. My fondest memory of Pa was his trip to meet me in Broome in 2008. I'd spent close to 6 months working for Paspaley Pearls along the northwestern coast to save up for a trip to Europe. I was there with 5 school friends, living intermittently based on our work and the swings that were involved at the local backpackers called the Kimberley Club. I spoke to Pa before I went out on my last week-long swing. He was to turn up the day that I got back, and I asked him where he was staying, and he responded, "With you." The idea of spending a week in a 6-man bunk room with your 78-year-old grandfather and a few backpackers at the age of 19 should probably pose more of a problem, but to not deny more time with Pa probably meant you were denying more fun. The week started with a bit of a hiccup. Due to weather restrictions, I couldn't get back to the mainland in time to pick up Pa. This job would have to rest on the shoulders of my great friend Jack Scholes, who's here today. Jack drove our 89 model Camry that we'd bought for $500 to the airport just out of town. He made it on time, but due to budget restrictions, it meant that he only made it halfway back to town with Pa. Pa and Jack pulled over and walked the last few kilometres back to town, suitcases in hand in 35-degree heat. It didn't worry Pa in the slightest. I think he kind of would have enjoyed the challenge and knowledge that we were definitely going to need him. I said to the boys that we probably can't start drinking at 12 and to pretend we normally start around 3. On the first morning, we finished breakfast and Pa suggested that we better go to the bar. That week was so special. I remember him telling me about falling in love with Nanny, and that was probably my most cherished memory of conversation with him, and I know how much he missed her, as we do. We spent the rest of that week fishing, camping, cooking and meeting people, just my mates and Pa. Every campsite Pa took us to, we'd meet someone new. We even ran into a mate of his that he used to swim with at the Masters Games at a caravan park at Cape Leveque. The last night of the trip was spent watching what's known as the Staircase to the Moon, which is an optical illusion in Broome where it looks like the moon's got a staircase on the ocean. Anyway, I'm sure you've probably heard of it. And it was a popular night for everyone in town. A group of girls that looked about the same age as us pulled up next to us. It was pretty obvious this was a group of girls we'd probably like to speak to. After a short while, Pa turned to us and said, "Well, if you guys aren't going to speak to them, I will." We let our lead wingman do his thing and slowly joined the table around him. I'll cherish that day forever. The kind words I've received over the past week from family and friends from every stage of my life have touched me greatly. Every significant life event, big or small, Pa was there. I mean everyone. Always watching, always interested, and always smiling. He taught me so many lessons through not just his words, but through his actions. He took it as expected to help out wherever you can and whoever you can. I'm so proud of the fact that Pa could attend and of course assist in one of our latest ventures, the Incognito Art Show. This year, he handled the cash. So I knew he was pretty good at doing that, and that's why he said that he'd do it, but I think it's probably because he was guaranteed to meet 2,000 more people, surrounded by all of his family before he went out. Pa went about life as if it never ended. This is what will stick with me forever. He never gave up on anything and kept giving until the very end. Keep telling me stories about him. I'll be telling stories about him. I know he would have liked that. To the greatest man I've ever known, you'll be missed. Vale, Mr. David, Pa, the Premier, you'll be missed but never forgotten. Thanks. Hi, I'm David Liston. I'm Meg and Bill's son and one of Pa's 5 grandsons. I have the honour of holding Pa's name, which has always been a great source of personal pride for me. The name David means beloved in Hebrew, and judging by today's crowd, I think he was named aptly. He would be disappointed to be missing this party. Most people think they have the best grandfather in the world. However, I actually did. But lucky for everyone else, he was always open for adoption as an additional or surrogate grandfather. My cousins and I guessed there'd be over 100 of our friends who knew Pa as Pa and treated him as such. He taught them to fish and water ski and always took great interest in their lives. It gave us a lot of joy hearing him called Pa by the Hoffmans, the Curtins and all of our schoolmates. We were very happy to share him. I heard from many of my friends this week, all sending their best and sharing memories of Pa. Many mates recalled the great parties we'd have at Strathamber while Pa slept soundly throughout. Pa would start the night by holding court with some of our friends on the balcony before he'd tell me that he'll just put his good ear down and he'll sleep like a baby, of which he did. One of my fondest memories of Pa was when he took myself, my brothers, my cousin Chris Dent, from Grafton to Yamba on the Clarence River on Iolanthe. What's normally a 49-minute car journey was a 9-hour boat trip. We swam and fished and took turns steering Iolanthe. It was a fantastic day. And I spoke to my cousin Chris last week after Pa's passing to discuss it. Chris quipped that the only beings in the Clarence Valley that would be glad to hear Pa passed away would be the black-spotted whiting. Pa taught us that you can take them home at any size and there was no bag limit. We never saw Pa throw a whiting back. They must all be black-spotted. The life lessons didn't end there. I learned all I ever needed to know about leadership from Pa when he told me that if you feed seagulls chips, they'll forget how to hunt for themselves and eventually starve when you're not there. I also learned about good consumer behaviour when he told me that he'd never seen the price of beer go down, but it's never been too expensive. If you didn't cook a meal, you clean up after it. You only ever sit at the northern end of Pippi Beach. You can overcook meat, but not toast. And you always keep a close eye on Mike Dent when you play cards with him. As mentioned, my last big event with Pa was the Incognito Art Show in June. Pa knew we needed volunteers, and so naturally his hand was first to go up. He counted the cash and was a calming influence on the whole event, as it was quite manic. As would be expected, I fielded questions and comments for weeks afterwards from all sorts of people about how wonderful my grandfather on the tills was. So I think Ed was right, he did meet all 2,000. I'm marrying my beautiful fiancée Neve in Ireland next August, and I confirmed the date with Pa last Friday. And as Mum said, he'd had it marked in, and he was lucky that it was still 5 weeks from Fraser, so he was going to make that. He'll just have to watch with Wendy from above. Pa's greatest achievement was raising a big family. Pa made it happen while we were all at Yamba. Growing up with cousins and aunties and uncles like ours was such a privilege, and the Dents, Listons, Sanders, Hayden, Simons and the other 100+ people that called Pa were very, very proud of him. On his deathbed, someone asked Pa where he would like to be. The choices being hospital or home. He said, with my 4 magnificent daughters. I think that said it all about Pa. So looking forward to celebrating with everyone at the Clock Tower afterwards.
The deal was the boys said that I had to go last in case I made them cry, but they have achieved that. My name is Georgie. I am one of Pa's granddaughters. To have been a grandchild of David Abrams is one of life's luckiest twists that I have been fortunate to share with my sister Belinda, my brother Chris, my cousins Dave, Ed, Ando, Alex and Mark Sanders. It's a blessing that my brother-in-law Chris and my husband Nick enjoyed too, from the moment they entered our lives. Not when we were married, just when they met. It's a blessing that my sister-in-law Rhiannon felt from afar. My nieces Coco and Poppy and my daughters Izzy, Lulu and Ruby had the fortune of not just being Pa's beloved great-granddaughters, but knowing him, their Gigi Pa. That Belinda, Chris, Coco, Poppy, Chris, Rhiannon, Mark and Alex aren't able to be here today is devastating. my sister Belinda shared some thoughts. She said, "As I reflect on the life of Pa, it hit me how lucky I have been to have him in my life for over 40 years. So many wonderful memories spanning 4 decades where Pa was a present and tangible part of my life. Yamba afternoons when Pa would take us out fishing in Jake, long days at Iluka where Pa taught countless family members and friends to water ski. Decades on, he was an integral part of his great-granddaughter's lives too. He regularly made the drive out to Narrabri and then the Gold Coast for their birthdays or just for a visit. Heading up the hill for an afternoon playing chess against Pa at Strathy will be a memory the girls cherish forever. The cousins would pair up and challenge him to a game. Poppy and Lulu somehow beat him once, but the best that Coco and Izzy ever did was to claim a single pawn. Pa was the epitome of interested and interesting. He had such a zest for life and knowledge and loved to be involved in everything. He thought nothing of jumping in the car to drive or fly countless hours to sporting matches, birthdays, any event. Whether it was the Wallabies playing the All Blacks or an under-16 thirds water polo match, Pa turned up. And he approached it with equal excitement. When Chris joined our lives, Pa welcomed him with such enthusiasm. He finally had a family member who shared his love of hand tools. Many times over the years, Pa would call Chris to discuss the latest men's sheds projects and was always keen for a tour of Chris's school workshops. This love of making has meant we are all left with so many precious keepsakes, from the hand-turned rolling pin in our kitchen drawer to the hall table that Chris and I signed our marriage certificate on. Our house is full of precious Pa productions that we will cherish forever. Sometimes it takes an outsider to make you realise how lucky you are. Not everyone has a grandfather who is so present and involved. I think that will be his enduring legacy. He has cultivated a family that values the same involvement and closeness. A family that will also travel far and wide to celebrate the smallest of achievements, or on days like this, to commemorate the greatest of losses. My newly married brother, Chris, said this: Pa role modelled what it means to be a loving and devoted husband, brother, father, and grandfather to so many more than his biological grandchildren. The lives of his friends and family and his community were better for having him in it, and he will be remembered for this. I will miss you, Pa, and I will cherish the Jacaranda weeks I spent with you and Nanny at Bacon Street, days spent fishing and water skiing in Jake on the Clarence River. I will miss Pa being on the sideline at what felt like every game of sport I ever played, Christmas at Yamba, and his dedication to family and friends. Pa was the best grandfather anyone could have, and I am lucky to have known and loved him. To have known Pa is to know a man who approached every day as presenting something worth celebrating or seizing. A man whose curiosity never waned in people, in places, in history, in family, and everything in between. A man whose family meant everything and who approached everyone as family. Pa was not just a kind, familiar presence. He was a permanent fixture. He happily turned up to anything and everything that was humanly possible. No matter how big or small, if it was remotely possible for Pa to be there, he turned up. More recently, even when it was barely possible, he still turned up. And he always turned up with pride and joy and interest and curiosity. Back in 2009, when my husband, who at that point was my fiancé, was offered a position to study and play rugby in Oxford, we hadn't even relocated yet when Pa rang. He'd already been in touch with the rugby club in Oxford to inquire about the famous varsity match between Oxford and Cambridge. It was to be held on the 10th of December, and better still, the weekend before, the Barbarians were playing the Wallabies at Twickenham, so we could all go along to that too. We hadn't even left Sydney. Nick had yet been selected to even play in the game, but Pa booked his tickets for a 10-day visit in December. He was 79 when he flew solo to Heathrow, collected a hire car, and rang us to say he was downstairs. We had 10 wonderful days together, seeing the sights, soaking up everything Oxford had to offer. Nick did make the team, and there was no doubt that Pa got a thrill out of watching him run around at Twickenham. But the true mark of Pa, in my view, and it's a view that Nick shares, is that Pa's enthusiasm wasn't reserved for big games or big occasions. He was agnostic about grades, codes, locations. If he knew someone in the field, whether it was his great-granddaughters at Nippers, one of his grandsons in the 13 Cs, a family friend playing hockey in Ipswich, he approached it with the same level of enthusiasm. And it wasn't just reserved for sport. It was art shows, birthdays, grandparents' days at school. Over the last 2 years, he would often pop up in the list of registrations for online work events that I was speaking at. On more than one occasion, event organisers passed on emails they had received before or afterwards from Pa. He was, with no exception, the only nonagenarian attending sessions on gender politics, early education and care. Whatever it was, Pa turned up. And in doing so, he showed us countless times how much we all mattered. He showed us how we can all make the big and the small matter. He showed us that hobbies and friends and jobs and family and food and books and holidays and traditions matter. He taught us that turning up matters. He lived with an open mind and open arms. I asked our daughters earlier this week to describe Pa, and a few words came to mind. Caring, selfless, welcoming, and interested. Just last Sunday, when Meg rang to say Pa was unwell, I couldn't quite fathom what I was hearing. Just the day before, Lulu and Pa had exchanged text messages. It was her birthday last week, and as he always did, he'd put money in my account for her. She used it to buy a new dress and a sun hat for her party, and sent him a text with a photo en route to her picnic. He replied that night, "Hello Lulu, so pleased to see you looking so lovely in the dress and smart hat. You were looking so good and happy. I look forward to seeing you and the family at Christmas. Yamba beckons. Much love, from Pa," filled with the cute emojis that he's been using for the last decade. Pa quite literally turned up for his family every day until the very last moment. Imagining the world without Pa is impossible. We have lost a giant who will be so, so missed. This week, the messages from near and far has confirmed the extent to which Pa touched lives, and extends so far beyond his family. He was a gentleman who led and inspired. He was a man who literally squeezed every last bit of life out of his 91 years. And for that, we will love him and we will never, ever forget him.
Thank you, that was beautiful. Well, it's quite clear that David was a diligent, upright and warm-hearted man, a driving force in his community, and a man that leaves behind a legacy of kindness, commitment, love, and enduring respect for all those that were privileged to have known him. He was an astute businessman, and a community leader, a loving husband, an inspirational father, a doting grandfather and great-grandfather, and a friend to everyone. His unique ways, his caring, and his understanding and love are things that everyone will miss and remember. But it is now time for us to watch some images, a reflection of David's life. Thank you.
Can I steal one of these, please, Bob?
The left one.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are having some problems with the sound. Apologies, there were a few problems with the sound. I'd now like to invite David Grundy, another of David's nephews, to come forward to share a verse with us all. Thank you, David.
To Dave, DG, my closest uncle, I'm so honoured to be able to offer this tribute to him. It's called When All That's Left Is Love, and he gave plenty of that. When I die, if you need not to weep, cry for someone walking the street beside you. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands and souls touch souls. You can love me most by sharing your goodness and multiplying your acts of kindness. You can love me most by letting me live in your eyes and not in your mind. And when you say Kaddish for me, remember what our Torah teaches. Love doesn't die, people do. So when it's all that's left of me is love, give me away. Thank you.
Thank you. As we near the end of our service and say goodbye to David, it is important that we are thankful that he was a part of our lives and that we let his influence, his character, his warmth and his deeds live on. Whilst David is no longer physically here with us, he will always be with us in our thoughts, in our feelings, his voice still in our head, and his love in our hearts, guiding us for the rest of our lives until we meet again. We are grateful for his friendship and the loyalty, for the good times and the difficulties that have provided the opportunity for change and transformation. We give thanks for the legacy he has left, for his wisdom and his inspiration, his guidance and his counsel, his care and dedication to his family, friends and community. Thank you, David, for your smile and the magic you wove into the lives of all those that you were around. Today for David, the blessings, the difficulties, the joys, the challenges, the creating, the work, the love, the giving and the receiving have all now run their course. His work here with us is now complete. It is therefore that I ask that you please be upstanding as I say the words of committal. Those joining via live stream may like to stand as well. We say farewell to David George Abrams, in sadness at his death, but in gratitude of his life and the special privilege in sharing in it. We give thanks for his life. We remember with gratitude his deep love for his family, his friends, and his community. David, on behalf of your family and friends, we are glad that you lived, that we saw your smile, experienced your love, knew your friendship, and walked the way of life with you. We leave you now to rest peacefully. As long as we live, you too shall live, as you are now a part of us. Would you please be seated? Today we have honoured David's life. His departure we accept. His memory we cherish. And although there is grief today as we say goodbye, there is gratitude for his life. But now, at the end of his days, he rests in the hearts and the minds of all those who loved him. Family and friends, that concludes the first part of our farewell to David. We will now be making our way to the Old Grafton Cemetery, where we will lay David in his final resting place. For those of you that prefer not to attend the graveside service, the family kindly invites you to the Clock Tower Hotel for refreshments, where you can wait until they arrive. The Clock Tower, I'm told, is a place where David, and as mentioned earlier, met with friends every Thursday, friends he'd had since he was 5 years old. Now it's time to leave this place. Our funeral director, Sharon, will come forward and gather the pallbearers and the family. When we go outside, we are going to form a guard of honour. I will direct you once we are outside. Thank you.